Well, I believe this is the heart of the Lord, right, Roland? Salvation of
Amen.
babies, eternal treasure.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Okay,
But
ladies and gentlemen,
we have
we're
a
ready to go
podcast,
live
but I
with
also
every-
am on the largest station in Florida. It's called WCNO. It's 100,000 watts, so we'll air that, when we send it down to be aired. We got to get. Matter of fact, it's this Friday,
Yes.
so we got to get this on CNO. Well, I'll have to make a special call after we do this. All right, because we'll be live on Facebook and YouTube and all that other stuff, but we want to get it on CNO. Okay. You tell me when. We're in the red.
Live. And now, the most trusted name in radio, serving the Treasure Coast for over 30 years, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
And we are very honored to have the president. What's his title, by the way? Executive Director title?
President. And
President.
CEO
And
of CareNet
of
National.
CareNet International. And I tell you what, this is his new book, The Alternative to Abortion. I have not read it, but I will say I love the title right away because those of us who want to stand in the gap for the unborn, we need all the help we can get, right? How you doing?
Good.
Roland.
I'm well.
Roland
Thank
Warren.
you.
Where are you from originally, Roland?
Well, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio,
Okay.
and went to college out in New Jersey, and then kind of settled in the Washington, D.C. area now. So I live actually in Frederick, Maryland, which is a part of, it's part of the big parking lot that is the DMZ, which is the not Delaware, excuse me, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia parking lot that that occasionally has houses. If you've ever been here, the traffic is pretty amazing. But
Wow.
so that's where I am now.
I don't know how anybody endures that because we went to, I was there when I was a kid, of course, but I went back a couple of years ago. So we leave on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Now, when I grew up, anywhere in America, even New York City, my grandfather had a place in New York City, you'd get up Sunday morning, there's no traffic. I get up in Washington, D.C. on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. trying to get out of town, bumper to bumper. Took almost 3 hours to get out of town. But have you
That's
been?
right. Unfortunately, they're not going to church, but they're on the road.
They're on the road, yeah. So they have that new
Yes.
building up there, that Hobby Lobby built, and it's on the Bible. Have you been to the Bible Museum yet?
Museum of the Bible. Yeah, fantastic. If you're ever in DC, you need to check it out. It's really, really amazing. They've done a fantastic job there. I've done a number of events there and been there for a number of different occasions. So it's been cool. It's a great place.
So
Check it out.
how long have you been in this position with CareNet, and how did that all happen?
Yeah, 13 years. I've been with CareNet for 13 years, and prior to that, I was with organization called National Fatherhood Initiative, working on helping men be better dads. Prior to that, I've spent about 20 years in the business world, doing all kinds of stuff, sales and marketing stuff, till God called me to do this work. So yeah, so kind of an interesting career path, I suppose.
Yeah, well, far more rewarding, right?
Well, I love marketplace guys because without them, marketplace folks, you can't do the ministry stuff. So, to me, I don't really have that kind of secular and sacred dichotomy at all. I mean, I feel like any of it, whether it's good, anything good comes from the Lord, whether it's a good PowerPoint or whether it's a good sermon, if it's righteous and seeking the justice and righteousness and mercy and the things that are reflected in the fruit of the Spirit, then it's from the Lord. So
Well, that's a good.
yeah, so he uses all the skills that you have and wherever he sends you. So yeah, but I've been here for about 13 years.
Well, that's a good, healthy attitude not to apologize for marketing, because we all need the developmental, position in all these non-for-profits. And of course, by the way, I want to introduce Bonnie Martinelli, and she's a love. She comes in here frequently, and we've been working together for years and years. And she's not only pretty on the outside, but beautiful on the inside. And we've helped save a lot of children, we hope, together. And we also have the executive director of the CareNet.
The board president.
Board
Amy.
president. And your name is?
Amy Beckley.
Amy Beckley. So welcome to the broadcast, everybody. Now you're going to be speaking this Friday night. You're also going to be speaking at a breakfast on Friday morning.
Yes. We have a church leaders breakfast that Roland's going to be speaking at Friday morning, and It is filled to the brim. So we have about 80 different people there representing at least 30 churches.
Well, I hope.
Hey,
We're so
yeah.
excited about that.
Well,
Good,
yeah,
great,
yeah.
fantastic.
I mean, anything you can get, if you can rile up the people who are sleeping don't you think this is the heart of God, though? I mean, the apple of his eye when it comes to the unborn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't have life, then nothing else really matters. I always get fascinated with people, particularly Christians, who are focused on a bunch of other important things. Don't get me wrong, good works that people do, that we're called to do, but life is fundamental. So if you're focused on, quote, social justice type things, but you don't focus on life primarily, then all that's for naught, right? If you don't have life, then liberty and the pursuit of happiness, that's not really an issue, right? So it is foundational, and it's clearly connected to the heart of God. He's the giver of life, and life starts at conception in the womb. And so, that's when we're most like God, if you will, when we're protecting the most vulnerable, which is what he did when he sent his son. So, yeah, I think this issue is very much connected to the heart of the Lord, for no question about that in my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing how some can be blinded to that. I know when my father was studying to be a lawyer, and he graduated Syracuse, and but when my mother had already had my older brother, my grandmother, my father's mother, suggested that she abort me. This is back in the
Oh.
50s, and so I'm glad she made a choice for life, and so. But I also can. I will also, as I was telling the ladies, I said, I'm a child of the '60s. I was at Woodstock, that whole thing, and if I had had a girlfriend, which I had many of back in my teens, if a girl had gotten pregnant, and she said, "I'm going to have an abortion," I remember thinking, "Oh well, that's not my business. Whatever you do, it's your body." And of course, it took. We cannot argue the things intellectually of God, but after having been born again in my living room at the age of 29, and the holiness of God entered me, the spirit of truth, I just suddenly, no one had to teach me, I suddenly knew that murdering babies certainly is wrong.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, no question about that. Yeah, it's a dilemma that folks face, and that's really what I talk about in terms of the book. I mean, I would kind of focus on how this issue is so very much connected to, certainly as Christians, it's certainly very much connected to the call of the church. And if you see from the title of the book, it's the alternative to abortion: why we must be pro abundant life, which is based on John 10:10, where Christ said, "I came that you might have life and then have that life abundantly." And really sort of using that as a framework to say, there's a distinction between being pro-life and being pro-abundant life, because abundant life is what Christ came to give us all. It's his why statement, and there's a distinction in terms of that. So that's what I talk about in the book quite a bit, kind of helping people understand the distinction. And given just the politics that are around the life issue, I always tell people, pro-life perspective is designed to lead you to the polls. A pro-abundant life perspective is designed to lead you to the cross. And you're supposed to take the perspective of the cross to the polls. And what we have too many Christians doing is heading to the polls without the perspective of the cross. And that's the reason why, for example, in so many of these, state referendums, the margin of difference in so many of them is actually Christians who profess to be pro-choice. In other words, they've gone to the polls, but they haven't looked at this issue biblically and taken that perspective with them to the polls. So start at the cross, take that perspective to the polls. It changes everything. Not only does it save lives, but it also changes the politics that are connected to the abortion issue.
Well, as soon as I saw your book for the first time this very morning, I had not read it yet, but The Alternative to Abortion, Why We Must Be Pro-Abundant Life, I immediately knew in my spirit, this is long needed. Like, for instance, on 116 Framework 2, engaging a pro-choice person, why it's important to find common ground. So loading up our gun, so to speak, with knowledge. And sometimes it helps. It's like somebody can tell you some things, this is what you should do, whether it's a child or an adult. This is a boundary. But somehow when it's put in word, it comes alive, right? So
yeah, absolutely. No, there's no transformation without conversation. So if you're really trying to move someone from a kind of pro-choice perspective to a pro-life perspective, is kind of what I walk through in the book. The first thing you have to help them be is pro-choice. In other words, there are two choices. One is for birth, and the other is for abortion. And if you are pro-choice, what you should believe is that you don't care which choice a woman makes as long as she has the right to make it. So whether she chooses abortion or birth, you don't care which one. And then kind of what I walk through in that is, well, okay, then if you're pro-choice, then you're probably trying to remove all the obstacles to abortion. Got it. Understand that. But if you're pro-choice, also there's a life part of your life, of your perspective. In other words, there's abortion and birth. Those are the two choices. So you should be just as aggressive trying to remove obstacles to birth. And what you find with folks who are pro-choice, too often they're spending all their time, talent, and treasure trying to remove the obstacles to abortion, but they're not trying to remove the obstacles to birth and the things that are connected to that, like where's the guy? You know, she doesn't have a place to
Yeah.
live. You know, I mean, there's all these different factors that are connected in the complex decision of abortion. And so, if you're pro-choice, you have to be just as aggressive on trying to remove the obstacles to birth. And then I kind of connect the dot that, hey, as a pro-life person, if you will, we're trying to remove the obstacles to birth. And there's actually a Venn diagram, a common ground between pro-life and pro-choice, which is for a woman who's facing an unplanned pregnancy and wants to bring her child into the world, which is frankly most of them, then pro-life and pro-choice should be working together on that perspective. And I think that when you get somebody to have that view, they say, oh my gosh, yeah, I guess as a pro-choice person, I should be for pregnancy centers, because what are we trying to do? Remove obstacles to abortion for women who want to bring their children into the world. And you shouldn't be against that. You should actually be for that if you're truly pro-choice and not, quote, pro-abortion, if you will. So I've got a whole discussion that kind of walks people through that perspective to help you in those conversations with folks.
Well, I like that. I ran an advertising firm in upstate, a small one, but an advertising firm in upstate New York. I'd love to sit down with you sometime. I like the idea that you came out of a marketing background, because you're right, no matter what you have. The best thing a friend of mine did, a Jewish friend of mine, he started an advertising firm when I was younger, and my mouth sort of dropped, and he said, what's the matter? I said, oh, I wish I could do that. And he was already prospering within a matter of 6 months. Found 10 clients that gave me, a certain amount of money, let's say $1,000 every month. I was like, back in, 35, 40 years ago, 60,000 a year wasn't bad, or 70,000, whatever it comes out to. And so, but I've learned in life that I said, I'd like to do that. He said, I'll teach you. I said, Howie. He ended up becoming the front man for Governor Cuomo, the original Cuomo. But anyway, Democrat. But anyway, he taught me. And when I came down to Florida to start my radio show and our magazine, that marketing. So everything needs to be marketed. And as you said, you're not apologetic for saying, hey, you came out of the marketing and you have to apply those skills to what you do. Now, your wife, Yvette, has an open letter in the book. And that's kind of a neat thing, because that gives us more insight into you as the author and the guy who heads this organization up. You want to tell us about Yvette?
Yeah. I mean, she's the one that got me into all this to begin with. or she might say it the other way around. But yeah, my wife, we've been married 43 years, but kind of it really starts with our relationship, this whole pro-abundant life perspective, because when we were we both were undergrads at Princeton. She was a sophomore, I was a junior. We got pregnant. She was 20. I was 9. I mean, I was 20. She was 19, and we got pregnant. And when she went to student health services, the nurse was like, "Hey, this is a positive test, and of course you're going to have an abortion." Yvette says, "No, I don't want to have an abortion. I want to have my baby." The nurse is like, "My gosh, how are you going to graduate from Princeton with a baby? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And what do you want to do when you graduate?" Yvette says, "Well, I want to become a doctor." The nurse says, "My gosh, how are you going to become a doctor with a baby?" Really encouraged her strongly to have an abortion. And by the grace of God, we didn't. We said, "No, we're going to get married." I said, "I'll be a husband to you, father to the child growing inside of you." And she graduated from Princeton, not with one baby, but with two. Both of our sons were born at Princeton, went on to become a doctor. She's been practicing close to 30 years now. And so, that perspective of what happened in that experience really kind of forms this whole notion of the pro-abundant life perspective. So she wrote that letter in the back of the book because there was this young lady who was, I think she's valedictorian at a high school in Texas. And she kind of took her speech she was supposed to give to encourage folks, and she turned it into an abortion speech. Essentially said, "Hey, we need abortion because if you're a woman, you're not going to be able to accomplish your dreams unless you have access to abortion." So my wife, who's a Texas girl, grew up in San Antonio, Texas, wrote a letter saying, "Listen, hey, I've been where you've been, but you've never been where I've been." And I can tell you, my wife was on Veterans Day. She was a major in the military, chief resident of a program. I mean, she's just pretty impressive in terms of all the stuff that she's done. And she did all of it with two babies, with two kids. And so one thing she doesn't have is the regret of having an abortion. which so many women that we and men, frankly, that we minister to do have. And so, really trying to put that other narrative out there that it is possible to accomplish dreams. They might be different. The timing's different. It will be different. But the reality is that you don't have that regret at the end of an abortion decision. And now we have a granddaughter through the son who she was supposed to abort, who is one of the joys of her life, along with her other 4 grandkids. So when she was 19, she couldn't see that moment of holding that granddaughter, but God did. And so that young lady in Texas doesn't have that perspective. And so Yvette felt called to really kind of put a different narrative out there in the public square, a true narrative of someone who's walked that path, understands the challenges, and really wants to encourage other young women to do the same.
It seems to be a common story because I know Tim Tebow was in town and I met his mom, who was told they were missionaries, told to abort him. And she said,
Yeah.
they've aborted at least, what'd she say? I don't know. She said like 50 potential Heisman Trophy winners. And then I have another friend in town here, and he and his wife, I don't know why, was told by a doctor to abort. They were going to, and they decided not to after deep prayer. And he became the valedictorian at St. Edward's, the son. So, don't listen to man. Well, no. Well, the fear of man shall be a snare unto you. And as King David said, cursed is the man that makes man his trust. Blessed is the man that maketh the Lord his trust. I'd like to talk about rape now, because everybody brings it up. Well, what about rape? Well, I met a number of people who were the result of rape, and they're real happy to be alive. You want to address that? How do you deal with that? When somebody says, what about rape?
I actually have a section in the book where I actually talk about that, because I know that's one of the difficult questions. And a lot of people who respond to that question say, well, from a pro-life perspective, rape is such a small percentage. Less than 1% of abortions are in cases of rape. And I always say, look, in that situation, you have to have the utmost of compassion for a woman who's faced that, because although maybe 1% statistically, for her, it's 100% for her. And so you have to have the utmost of compassion in that situation. But I think that how you respond to that all kind of spins on this question, which I think is the central question, which is, should the circumstances of a child's conception and birth determine its humanity and worth?
Yeah.
That's the question. Should the circumstances of a child's conception and birth determine its humanity and worth? And I think when I ask that question, I don't care whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, people say, no, of course not. The circumstance of a child's conception but should not determine its humanity and worth, whether conceived in love or lust or, we know that. In fact, that's part of what kind of defines our humanity. In fact, that perspective, if you do believe that, that's the reason why people who look like me, years ago were slaves. Why? Because the circumstances of a child's who looked like me's conception and birth determined my humanity and worth. Same thing in Nazi Germany. So if you answer that question that way, then you actually are linked to some of the most heinous and most intractable social ills that have ever existed in humanity. Well, when you answer that question in terms of a child who's conceived as a result of rape, the same question. Well, I don't believe the circumstance of a child's conception and birth should determine its humanity and worth. Because if you walk down that path, you're in a very different place. So that when you start there, you got clarity here, right? So the child, the act of, and the other thing I think I always tell people is like, what is it about rape that is so abhorrent? What's so abhorrent? I mean, you think about it, it's actually someone using their power, right? A guy in this case, using his power against the vulnerable. That's what we found so abhorrent. And so if you think about abortion, what is the abortion thing? Well, it's someone using their power against someone who's less vulnerable. So, but the same reason why you should be against rape is the same reason why you should be against abortion, right? We look at that situation, we say, look, who's the more powerful, right? Who's the more vulnerable? And what we do is we ascribe the most compassion for the most vulnerable. And in that situation, obviously, the baby in the womb is the most vulnerable. You have compassion for a woman who's faced that situation and all that. You understand that. But also you have to apportion compassion. You should probably have more compassion for the more vulnerable. And in fact, that's what makes us human, right? Because we tend, like an animal apportions the most compassion to the most powerful. So if you're lying on the Serengeti and you go like, hey, I'm looking at a adult gazelle and a baby gazelle, and I'm like, who am I eating for dinner? Right? He's like, oh, okay, I'm letting the adult go free and I'm going to eat the baby. In other words, you apportion more compassion to the powerful. And when we see that, we think, oh my gosh, that's an injustice that you do that. So, when you have clarity on this from a biblical perspective, then you understand, wait, no, actually, what makes us human, what makes us most like God is when we apportion the most compassion to the most vulnerable. And so you have a consistent worldview as it becomes with rape, which is abhorrent. We should reject it at every step. But then you also have to use that same perspective when you look at a situation, look at the situation of what's happening in the womb, right? That the child is the most vulnerable, and we need to do everything power within our society in order to do that. And the last thing I'll say on that, and I've talked to many women who have had children as a result of rape, and one of the things that I found as a central point with them is they refuse to let the rapist extend his power through them.
Right. Now that's a great
Vulnerable child.
perspective because women they'll respond to that. Oh yeah, am I giving up my power to this creep?
Well, that's exactly what the issue is because now you're allowing that guy to extend his power
That's
through
right.
you
Yeah,
to
exactly.
hurt another vulnerable. So having the child actually is an act of like, wait a minute, I am not going to allow this guy to extend his power through me. I'm not going to allow that to happen. Right. And so they reject, and that's why they are empowered in that moment. They're going, no, I am going to, he used his power in order to violate the vulnerable. I'm not going to use my power to violate the vulnerable because I want nothing to do with that reality
Right.
that he lived. And I want nothing to do with the kind of circumstance that he brought into the world. So they bring these children into the world as that with them, the utmost of courage. And frankly, when you think about it, a woman who makes that decision, I mean, she's most like Christ in that moment. Why? Christ did nothing to deserve being on the cross. Nothing. He didn't deserve any of it. But what did he do? Right? He sacrificed himself for the vulnerable. That's what he did. And so I think women who do this and walk through that, the clarity that they have as they walk through is actually, I'm most like God when I'm protecting the vulnerable. And they don't want this guy, whatever he did, to be extended through them, to extend the evil that he did to another vulnerable, and it's really a perspective. But again, it's a hard situation, it's a tough situation, and we have to do the utmost to care for women who face this situation. But the reality, caring for them is not helping them extend the power of the rapist through them to another vulnerable person. That's actually not helping them, and it doesn't bring them the hope. And I'll give one last point to kind of put a fine bow on this, right? We I have this framework in the book I call compassion pairing, where we go where basically you say who's the more powerful, who's the more vulnerable, and you kind of pair people together, right? So you say with the woman, who's the more powerful, the woman who's the more vulnerable, the child in the womb. Therefore, we ascribe more compassion to the child in the womb. That's a pro-life perspective. We're not saying the woman has no vulnerability, and we're not saying the child has no power, but we're saying that the child has less power than the woman, right? And then we do that. If you do a compassion pairing between the rapist and the baby who's conceived as a result of rape, and you say, who's the more powerful? The rapist. Who's the more vulnerable? The baby that's conceived as a result. Well, actually, who gets killed in the case of abortion? The baby. How does that make sense? When the baby's wait, so we're having more compassion for the rapist because the rapist doesn't get killed, but the baby gets killed. You see? So you end up walking yourself down a path where you actually extend the power of the rapist and actually kind of model that out that way. And so my view is very, very clearly that, you have to look at it through that perspective. So the circumstances of a child's conception and birth determine its humanity and worth. And if you say yes, then you can line yourself up with all kinds of folk, right, who you don't want to be lined up with. But if you say no, then what that means is that even in the situation of rape, you protect the child in the womb because that child, the circumstances of their conception and birth does not determine their humanity and worth. They're created in the image of God, Imago Dei, regardless of how they're conceived. And I believe that when we act that way, we're most like God. And again, most people in society, that's how they think. Exactly like that. I just say extended to this issue as well.
Well, I'm sure that you use the power of story when you come and speak like you're going to on Friday. And I remember this story. This is a good one. You probably already have it in your file, but maybe not. This lady, she had venereal disease, and she had 9 children, and she was told she should have an abortion. And she said, "No, I don't think so." And she had that child, and that child turned out to be Mozart.
Yes, I heard that story. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's amazing.
One of our mothers, not too long ago, she was raped, and everybody around her was telling her she needed to have an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, why would I do that? If they only knew what it would do to me if I aborted my baby, I would be suicidal. And so she said, that baby did nothing to me. It was the guy who raped me. And she said just exactly what Roland's talking about. And now that little guy is running around. He's about 3 years old. And, she's so grateful she didn't listen to everybody and she had that baby.
Well, I think God gets a kick. He takes the foolish things of this world to confound those that are wise, including those in leadership, even in Christian circles. He'll go, who's that guy, coming in here? It's like you go into a restaurant and there's some bum sitting over the corner. Well, it turns out the bum is the billionaire in the room, And so mankind, and God gets a kick. Even in Christian circles, you'll find somebody who's, well, look at D.L. Moody. The guy had no degree, no education, and went out and won hundreds of thousands of people to the Lord. So, you never know where God seems to get a kick out of that, So every,
Well, he does. He really does. And, I think that one of the other things here, and this is, I think, one of the biggest deceptions about this whole issue is that the premise of an abortion is that nothing good can come from this child. And it's not even 50-50. Like, you are certain that nothing good can come from this child. In other words, you know with certainty there's nothing good that can come for this child, for you, for society, and you're making that certain thing. Who knows that? I mean, who actually knows that? Who for certain? You don't know that what good can come from the child. And so that's why that decision is not in our hand, if you will, because only God orders the path of man.
Hey, look, where was Jesus born? He was homeless, wasn't he? The guy was homeless. And then the angel said, hey, you not only are you homeless, but you got to go over into this other country till we get rid of the child's enemy, And then
No, I don't. It's an amazing thing. So anybody can count the number of apple seeds in an apple, but only God knows the number of apples in a single seed.
And you also brought up,
that
that's right. And you also brought up, you said people look like me, meaning the color of your skin. You got a tan.
Yes.
And how stupid is that? That people are prejudicing against people
because
they have a tan.
Permanent one.
I'll never get that, I'll never get that. But anyway, but the bad news is that lady, the Roe versus Wade lady, who pushed that through, had a hatred for people of color. And as I know, I've been told that more people of color have aborted babies than the white folks. People wake up,
Yeah. It's a pretty amazing thing, and, as an African American, it's one of the reasons why, in my view, I mean, one of the many, but that it's so abhorrent because as a Black person, I tell other Black people, it's like, how can you line up with this? Again, the notion behind abortion is that nothing good will come from this child. So if Black children are aborted at a higher rate, right? Black women are roughly, that are childbearing age, are roughly 3% of the population, right? And have like 30 to 40% of the abortions. And society supports that. So really what that's sort of saying, and I'm trying to stop it, right? So society is basically saying your children are a net negative on society compared to other children. I mean, isn't that the height of racism? I mean, isn't that the height of what we've been marching? Wait, our kids are a net negative compared to other children. Well, you line yourself up with the Klan, you line yourself, all kinds of folks. And so it's really a remarkable thing that this narrative has been so, particularly in the Black community, and frankly, by a lot of Black prominent leaders, and politicians and people that like the major folks out there are supporting abortion as being, quote, empowering for Black folks, when the reality is the premise behind it is that nothing good will come from that child. It's better off dead. And if there's a specific demographic where more of those children are killed structurally, systemically than any other, then you're actually saying that this demographic of folk are a net negative compared to another demographic of folk. And for me, that's been one of the reasons I'm very, very passionate about this, because I think that Black people are creating the image of God just like everybody else.
Hold on a second. Frankly, I've been to Israel, and you're a very light-skinned, dark man. Probably Jesus probably had about the same color skin you have. I mean, that's the truth. If you've ever been a Nazarene, that's the way they look. I mean, People are
Yeah, well,
well,
that's
you know,
interesting.
people worship a Jew on Sunday and then hate Jews on Monday. What the heck? I had a friend of mine, very wealthy in upstate New York. His mother, I'm very, what do you call it? The people they all have the fancy schmancy homes when they're young and everything's right.
Yeah.
She hated Jews. 2 years before she died of cancer, she found out she was half Jew. I mean, what is with people? I mean, so I wanted to ask you this, a little aside here. So Einstein, now he taught at Princeton where you and Yvette went, right? And
Yeah, he was at the was it Center for Advanced Studies, I think it was, or
and
something like that.
he's
Yeah,
the
he
guy
was
that said,
a lot of-
everybody wants to acquire all this junk. And he said, all you really need is a comb and a toothbrush. And he said, and matter of fact, you really don't need the comb. But when you were at Princeton, did you sit at the table where he etched his name into the table in the pub?
No, I don't think that I did.
You should go there.
I don't think that I did.
I'm surprised they don't have it.
His legacy is definitely there, and a lot of the not the dorms, but the classrooms are still there. There's Makash, which is I think from like the 1800s or something. That was there. There's lots of places where he and a bunch of very notables in American history and science kind of walk the halls. So it's a pretty old place. I think it's like 1746. I think was when Princeton was founded, or somewhere around there. So kind of an interesting place to be.
Are you going to bring Yvette with you this weekend, or is she busy doing other stuff?
Yeah, I can't keep her out of Florida. If I say I'm going to Florida, she'll elbow me in the throat to go with me. So I protect my throat. She loves, and if there's beach anywhere in like Vera Beach or Palm, like any beaches, she's like, oh yes, I'm coming with you on this one.
Well, you're gonna like it here. It's one of the last small towns, one of the last small seaside villages. We're trying to keep it that way, but I will tell you this: it's a great place to invest now because you will not lose. Well, listen.
Wow, cool.
So I want to tell you, it's been great. This book is an important book. I mean, I don't know all books that have been written on abortion, but did you ever read that? But I just like this. The alternative to abortion is like, ooh, it made me immediately. I felt within my spirit, oh, this is good, because we need to have those answers when we're speaking, And by the way, did you ever have that? Did you ever meet that young lady? She was on my show a number of times, probably 25 years ago. But she was aborted, but they pulled her out, and the doctor wasn't there. So she's from like Tennessee or something, or up that way. She goes around. She's got cerebral palsy because of the way they pulled her out. But
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. There's several that have survived abortion. I think the one I was thinking was Melissa Olden. I think it is.
That's the name I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, but then there've been a number who've survived
Can you imagine?
Abortion miraculously and are great advocates. Are great advocates for life. So I think if people take a look at the book, I'm fairly confident it's something that you've never read before. But it really talks about, if you want to know the difference between being pro-life and being pro-abundant life, and why as Christians we are called to be pro-abundant life. A little bit of the punchline: Jesus wasn't pro-life; he was pro-abundant life. And I talk about that quite a bit and tell you why, and that's what I want to talk about on Friday, to unpack that a bit more and how that's so important in terms of supporting the amazing work that Bonnie and her team are doing, and why if the church is pro-abundant life, then the pregnancy centers get the support that they need. Not just to save babies, but to make disciples for Jesus Christ, which is the call that we have in Christ, is to make disciples and to look at every good work that we do: water for the thirsty, food for the hungry, clothes for the naked, homes for the homeless. We see all those things through a discipleship lens, but compassion for the pregnant. Most folks see that through a political lens, and that's actually hurt us in terms of doing what we're supposed to do. And frankly, it's hurt us in terms of even saving the lives of those in the womb. So that's what the book's about. Walks through that.
Well, Roland Warren, of course, an accomplished author and serves as president and CEO of CareNet, and he will be in town. There's still some tickets available for the dinner on Friday night. Get in touch with CareNet if you would like to purchase one of those tickets and support life. Yeah, life. And his book is The Alternative to Abortion: Why We Must Be Pro-Abundant Life. And is there anything that I've been amiss in asking you today, sir?
No, you've been very thorough.
Okay. Well, look, I look forward to meeting you. I hope I get to meet Yvette too. And
Yes.
strong man, strong wife, right?
That's right. That's right. We're a team.
Or should I say
There we
strong
go.
wife, strong man?
Yeah, they both got to be strong, right?
Yes,
We're
yeah, they
equally
do.
yoked.
Well, women are
Here
a
we
great
go.
gift. Well, listen, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you.
And I'll see you Friday night.
Okay, blessings to you. See you,
Thanks,
Bonnie.
Roland.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
Roland.
Amy.
Looking forward to seeing you.